Okay, let's get into this. When you think about who really controls the world's oceans today, your mind probably jumps straight to, powerful navies, maybe aircraft carriers, warships. But what if the real story, the dominant force, isn't military at all? What if it's actually about these gigantic commercial ships, the ones carrying, well, pretty much everything you own, your phone, your clothes, even your car across the globe? And here's the kicker, China. They're absolutely dominant here. We're talking, what, over 1 in 3, sometimes closer to half of all the world's large commercial ships are built in China now. Container ships, massive oil tankers, complex gas carriers, you name it. Their presence in this industry is just enormous.
It really is. And it's not just, a gradual increase in market share. It feels more like a silent revolution, something that's completely reshaped global trade in a very short time. Think about it. For decades, shipbuilding was led by Europe, then Japan stepped up, then South Korea became the powerhouse. China, in just what, maybe 20, 25 years, they've surged past everyone. It's quite staggering. So that brings us to the big questions, right? How on earth did China pull this off? How did they become this shipbuilding superpower? And maybe more importantly for many listeners, what does this mean for countries like the U.S., which used to be a major maritime force? That's what we're going to explore today, looking at how this whole transformation happened.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Go back to the 1980s. China, in shipbuilding terms, was basically nowhere. They didn't have the huge shipyards, not the modern tech, definitely not the global experience. Their economy was still pretty closed off.
Exactly. A non-factor, really. But then came the big shift. Deng Xiaoping's reforms in 1978. As China opened up and its economy started booming, they hit a major wall. They desperately needed ships. Ships to get their exports out, ships to bring resources in. Relying on foreign fleets was expensive and, well, strategically risky. So the government made a really decisive strategic call. The message was clear. We are going to build our own ships, period.
But their first thought wasn't, let's take over the world market, was it? It sounds like the initial goal was more immediate.
Precisely. Self-reliance was goal number one. Forget global dominance for a moment. They started relatively small, focusing on simpler stuff, coastal cargo ships, small tankers, things mainly for their own domestic use. And this task fell to the big state-owned companies like CSSC, the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, and CSI, the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation.
Okay.
These were government-controlled entities, basically given the mission, make China self-sufficient.
How did they start? They didn't have the tech, you said.
Right. So they were pragmatic. They started by learning from others. They bought ship designs from European companies, from Japanese firms. They even set up joint ventures, invited German and Japanese companies to come work with them in Chinese shipyards. It was a classic strategy for technology transfer, learn the basics, absorb the know-how quickly.
Okay, so learning by doing, essentially. But then comes what seems like the secret sauce, maybe. This incredible government support. Sound like more than just support, almost like a strategic masterstroke.
That's a really good way to put it. It was comprehensive, long-term, and incredibly focused. You can sort of break it down into three main pillars. First, just huge financial assistance. We're talking about state banks, like the China Development Bank, offering loans to shipyards at incredibly low interest rates. Get an international order, boom, immediate funding often followed. Plus, you had significant tax breaks, direct subsidies. It all added up. The result, Chinese shipyards could consistently underbid competitors from Europe, Japan, South Korea by, say, 20%, sometimes even 30%. That's a massive competitive edge right there.
Okay, so cheap money and subsidies. What was the second pillar?
Strategic planning. This wasn't just allowed to happen. It was directed. Shipbuilding was officially declared a national priority in their 5-year plans. And these plans were detailed. They literally mapped out where new shipyards would be built, what their capacity should be. Dozens of huge modern yards popped up from the 90s through the 2000s, especially in coastal hubs like Shanghai, Dalian, Guangzhou. And then you have initiatives like Made in China 2025. That plan specifically targeted moving up the value chain, building more complex high-tech ships like LNG carriers, those specialized tankers for liquefied natural gas, and even pushing into luxury cruise liners. Really ambitious goals.
Ambition backed by planning. And the third pillar.
This one might be the most impressive, creating an entire ecosystem. China didn't just decide to build ships, they decided to build everything needed to build ships domestically.
What do you mean, like the components?
Exactly. Take steel. China deliberately became the world's biggest steel producer, over half the global output by 2023. Why? To guarantee cheap, high-quality steel right there for their shipyards. No depending on imports.
Smart.
Marine engines, the heart of the ship, right? They partnered with foreign leaders, Germany's M&M, Japan's Mitsubishi, to learn the tech. Now, Chinese companies like Wingjie, which is actually part of CSSC, are major global players in engine design and manufacturing. And it goes further. They localized almost everything. Specialized paints, miles of cabling, complex electronics. Producing it all at home cut costs, reduced import reliance, and massively sped up construction times.
So basically, they built a fortress around their shipbuilding industry. Everything needed was inside the walls.
That's a great analogy. No other nation has achieved that level of vertical integration on this scale. It makes them incredibly resilient to supply chain shocks and gives them that sustained cost advantage.
The result of all this, I mean, it speaks for itself, doesn't it? From almost nothing in the 80s. By 2000, they cracked the top 10. By 2010, they overtake South Korea to become #1 globally. And by 2023, securing nearly half the entire global order book, dominating container ships, tankers, gas carriers. It's just phenomenal growth.
Phenomenal is the word. And underpinning this growth, beyond the government support, was this relentless drive for efficiency and scale. Their mantra was simple but powerful. Build big, build better, sell cheaper. Easier said than done, of course, but they executed it brilliantly.
Let's talk about that scale. It's hard to really picture these shipyards, isn't it? They're not just factories. They sound like small cities, places like Dalian, Jiangyan.
Yeah.
You're saying they can build dozens of these enormous ships at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine vast complexes stretching for miles, hundreds of cranes moving constantly, thousands of workers, advanced robotics. It's an incredible hive of activity. A single yard might have 10, 15 huge container ships or tankers under construction simultaneously, often working around the clock. The scale is just mind-boggling.
And how do they manage that speed and scale? Is it just throwing people at it?
Not just that. A huge factor is their mastery of modular construction. Instead of building a ship piece by piece from keel up, they build it in large sections, like giant Lego blocks modules which are fully outfitted.
Ah, okay.
Then these massive modules are brought together and assembled. China has refined this process to an art form. It's incredibly fast and cost-effective. So, a giant 20,000 TEU container ship that's 20-foot equivalent units, the standard box size China can churn one out in maybe 12 to 18 months.
Whereas elsewhere.
You're often looking at over 24 months, sometimes significantly longer. It's a major time saving.
And building so many ships at once must bring down costs too, right? That basic idea of economies of scale.
Definitely. When you're buying steel, engines, paint, everything in quantities for dozens of ships instead of just one or two, your purchasing power is immense. The cost per ship for raw materials drops significantly.
It gives them that pricing edge we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And while, cheap labor was an early advantage, especially back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Right. Wages were much lower then.
Much lower than Europe or Japan, for sure. But today, while labor costs are still competitive, China's real edge isn't just cheap wages anymore. It's that combination of sheer efficiency and, crucially, that integrated supply chain we discussed. Having almost every single part from the steel plates to the engine pistons to the navigation systems made domestically and readily available, that's a strategic advantage. Competitors who rely on importing components just can't easily match. It cuts costs and delays dramatically.
Plus, it's not low-tech work anymore, is it? These shipyards sound incredibly advanced.
Oh, absolutely state-of-the-art. They use a lot of automation, robotics for things like welding, cutting, painting tasks that require precision and speed. This reduces errors, speeds everything up. And they're heavily into digital tech, too, using sophisticated 3D modeling for design, simulation for construction planning. It makes the whole process incredibly precise and efficient.
So it's this potent mix. Government strategy, massive scale, efficiency, technology, and that integrated supply chain. That's how they got to nearly 50% of the market.
That's the picture, yeah. A multifaceted strategy executed over decades.
Okay, so China's rise is clear. Let's pivot now. What about the United States? We always hear about the U.S. Navy being the most powerful in the world. Where does the U.S. stand in commercial shipbuilding?
Yeah, that's a really important distinction to make. The U.S. shipbuilding industry is overwhelmingly, almost entirely focused on the military side.
Yeah.
You have major players like Huntington Ingalls, General Dynamics, NASSCO, and yes, they build arguably the most advanced, most capable warships and submarines on the planet. Their expertise in defense tech is world-leading.
But on the commercial side, the picture's very different.
Starkly different. For those big commercial vessels, the container ships, the oil tankers we've been talking about, the U.S. market share is tiny. Less than 1% globally.
Less than 1%. Wow. So why is there such a massive gap between the military strength and the commercial weakness?
Several key reasons. First, as we said, the historical focus and government investment has overwhelmingly favored military needs. National security has been the priority. Second, you have the Jones Act. This is a law from 1920, and it mandates that any ship carrying goods between two U.S. ports must be built in the U.S., owned by U.S. citizens, and crewed by U.S. citizens.
Okay, so that sounds like it should help U.S. shipbuilding.
In theory, it supports a small domestic market, but the reality is those Jones Act ships are significantly more expensive to build than ships made in, say, China or South Korea. They just aren't competitive on the global market.
Why are they so much more expensive?
Well, higher labor costs in the U.S. are definitely a factor. But maybe even more critically, the U.S. lacks that integrated supply chain we saw in China. There isn't a vast domestic ecosystem churning out cheap steel, engines, and all the other components needed for commercial ships. They often have to import parts, which adds cost and complexity. And finally, compared to China's massive, sustained strategic support for commercial shipbuilding, the U.S. government provides very limited financial backing or long-term planning for the commercial sector. The focus is defense.
So just to be clear, the U.S. is a leader in shipbuilding, but specifically for very advanced, very expensive military vessels, not the workhorses of global trade.
Exactly. The technology, the quality, the complexity of U.S. aircraft carriers, submarines, destroyers, it's unmatched. But that expertise and cross-structure just doesn't translate well to the economics of building standard container ships or tankers for the global market.
Which leads to the question, can the U.S. stage a comeback in commercial shipbuilding? Is that even realistic?
A huge challenge, honestly. Possible. Maybe. But it will require a monumental effort, a real long-term national commitment. You'd need massive investment, probably sustained over decades, like China did. You'd need to somehow build or rebuild an integrated domestic supply chain for components. And you'd need serious R&D focus on the future, things like green ships, smart ships. Some U.S. companies like NASCO are actually doing good work on more eco-friendly designs, but it's relatively small scale.
And those hurdles like the Jones Act and the high costs, they don't just disappear.
Exactly. Those remain significant obstacles to becoming globally competitive. Plus, the current geopolitical landscape adds another layer. America's reliance on Chinese-built ships for its own trade is, frankly, a strategic vulnerability that policymakers are starting to talk about more.
Meanwhile, China isn't standing still, right? It sounds like their advantage isn't just about being cheap anymore.
Not at all. That's a key point. They're not just copying designs or relying on low costs now. They are investing billions in R&D, actively innovating. They're strategically moving into higher value, more complex ship types. We mentioned LNG carriers, but also things like sophisticated cruise liners, a market Europe traditionally dominated, and specialized vessels for installing offshore wind farms. They're aiming for leadership across the board.
And what about those green and smart ships you mentioned?
China is pushing hard there too. With global regulations tightening on emissions, they're already a leader in building ships powered by LNG, liquefied natural gas. And they're experimenting heavily with alternatives, battery power, hydrogen, ammonia. They're also investing heavily in smart ship technology, think AI-driven navigation, autonomous systems, and even fully automated shipyards run by robots. They see this as the future and want to dominate it.
So they're looking ahead. But surely there are challenges for China too. No industry leader has a completely clear path.
True. They face potential headwinds. A major global economic slowdown would mean fewer orders for new ships, which would hit their massive shipyards hard. Geopolitical tensions are another factor. If trade wars escalate, or if sanctions or tech restrictions are imposed, that could definitely impact their industry. And like everyone else, they have to navigate increasingly strict environmental regulations, which demands constant innovation and investment in cleaner technologies.
But it sounds like they're anticipating these things.
They certainly appear to be. By diversifying into those high-value ships, they're less reliant on just standard bulk carriers or tankers. They have a huge domestic market they can also focus on. And their overall goal seems clear: master every type of ship, every key technology, to solidify their control over this critical global industry, whatever challenges arise.
Okay, so looking back at everything we've discussed, China's journey in shipbuilding is really quite a story. It's about vision, long-term planning on a massive scale, and just relentless execution, isn't it? It really shows how government policy, combined with industrial might and a focus on future tech, can fundamentally shift global leadership in a key sector.
Absolutely. And if you think about lessons maybe for the U.S. or other countries wanting to compete, China's playbook offers some clear, if challenging takeaways. It highlights the power of a truly long-term, maybe 10, 20-year strategic vision for an industry, the importance of building that whole domestic ecosystem, the suppliers, the skills, the finance, providing consistent, significant financial support specifically for the commercial sector, and critically now, investing heavily in the R&D for those next-generation green and smart ships. It's a comprehensive approach.
It really makes you think. Control of the seas has always been the symbol of global power, right? Historically, that meant powerful navies. But maybe today that power is shifting, or at least shared, with the commercial fleets that carry the world's trade. And in that game, China has undeniably carved out a dominant position. So let me turn it over to you, the listener. What do you think? Is it realistic for the US or anyone else to seriously challenge China's dominance in commercial shipbuilding now? Or is this the new reality on the high seas for the foreseeable future? We'd genuinely be interested to hear your perspective on this. And if you found this conversation useful or thought-provoking, please do consider sharing it with friends or colleagues who might find it interesting too.